Hello, this is our project on the Tropicana casino parking garage collapse. It was created by Ryan Hernandez, David Shanley, Mark Nager, and Jose Gonzalez. So some background and context of this collapse. The incident happened in Atlantic City, New Jersey on October 30th, 2003. The incident took place at a 10-story parking garage that was part of the casino's new expansion project and was currently still under construction. While the concrete was being casted on the higher floors of the parking garage and still settling, floors number P7 through P3 collapsed, and as a result, 4 construction workers were unfortunately killed and over 20 people were injured, suffering major to minor injuries. The building construction, it was still in progress, as mentioned upon collapse. It was designed to be a 10-story tall parking structure to add additional parking for the casino and the resort. The slabs on levels P4 through P8, they were cast in intervals of 1 week or more approximately. So each week an additional slab was added. So levels P8 through P4 were cast on October 30th, 18th, 10th, the 2nd through the 3rd, and September 22 through 24, 2003 is when the first floors were built on the structure. This implies that the concrete on all levels, except for P8 and P7, had achieved the full concrete strength by the time of collapse. This allowed enough time for the concrete to fully settle and harden and attain maximum strength. But because P8 and P7 were the most recently laid foundations, they also were not fully, had not reached full strength. Some flaws that were included in the structure of the building. There were some cracks on the supports, premature removal of the reshores. The concrete had not reached the sufficient strength on all the floors before they were adding additional layers. Poorly inspected placement of the reinforced steel, and mock-up drawings of the structure were flawed as well. So there were multiple structural errors that happened in this building project. The structure type of the parking garage, it was built with a filigree wide slab composite type concrete construction. And so what this is, it's a process for construction of concrete floors where there's 2 interconnected concrete placements. One is generally precast in a factory and brought in, and the other is done in the field where they overlay on each other. The frame was weak. Unfortunately, there were inspectors there, but no inspector noticed the absence of proper rebars in the concrete while it was being poured, and they were never placed on P4 through 8, P through P8, and those were not caught by inspectors. The absence of these rebars compromised the integrity significantly of the structure and contributed to the collapse from weakness in the frame. Some weather conditions, they weren't actually a factor on this collapse. There were no reported high winds that day. It was a normal fall day, and there was no evidence pointing to any soil disruption of the structure or movement of the foundation that had any effect on this collapse. It was purely mechanical based off of the structure itself. Some reasons for the collapse. The main factor that contributed was the cracks along the exteriors of the slabs and beams that were not noticed by inspectors. The shores were removed before the concrete was fully set. That was another major error that took place. Another element of this is they used a lot of wrong materials that were not up to code at the time. The structural mesh that they used to replace rebar is cheaper, but it was not did not have as enough of a support as the rebar would have had. And there was, and again as mentioned, inadequate inspection by the site engineers. It was their main priority was to inspect the rebar, and none of this took place. And they would have noticed the lack of sufficient rebar that was replaced by a wire mesh instead. Additionally, the clarity of the design was not managed well, which resulted in a misuse of the materials and created a loss of structural planning and integrity. And additionally, contractors from the company FIPT that was part of the construction team, were reported to have cracked the shores before concrete was settled and tested. The proper tests were not fully formed. You can see here in these pictures on the bottom the cracks in the concrete and the limited rebar that was used. One slab that was created by mild state filigree was heavy. That was heavily relied on throughout the structure. It was later investigated by OSHA, and it was deemed insufficient to support the load. So again, multiple mistakes that led to the collapse of this structure. The outcome of this collapse, again, unfortunately, there was a loss of 4 lives. They were the construction workers working on the upper decks when it collapsed. 20 more people were injured as a result. Damage from the collapse also further collapsed additional decks around it. The lower floors were also damaged as well. They just didn't fully collapse. And upon further review, there were additional issues that were found within the building construction that were red flags for this that were not caught prior to the collapse. This incident had an impact, and it set a precedent for buildings to follow guidelines more thoroughly. The guidelines were present while this building was going up in 2003, specifically for concrete structures, but they were not followed properly in this, and the inspection was not carried out thoroughly. Some issues include structural mock-up. It lacked clarity, lack of detail for the supporting steel, and that construction team overlooked those details, and no follow-up on the cracks found on the support columns were found on the building. And again, these are some of the factors that led to the outcome of this. And here's our resources that we use. This government document from OSHA gave a very good case study for us to learn about this. So thank you very much for watching our presentation, and have a great rest of your evening.